Good Yom Tov and Shana Tova to all. You know, there are some words in Yiddish that are difficult to translate into English. You may know the joke about the Shlemiel, the one who is clumsy, the Shlemazel, the one who has bad luck, and the Nudnik. You know what the difference between them is? The Shlemiel spills the soup. The Shlemazel is the one who the soup, of course, lands on. The Nudnik is the one who says, "Excuse me, was that chicken soup or pumpkin soup?" But I want to add one more character to this anecdote, and that is the Nebuch. The Nebuch is the one who has to clean up that soup and complains about it for the next 17 years. Oy, that was so difficult, I had to clean up the soup. So, right now, let's think. We all have in our lives difficulties, challenges, and at a time like Rosh Hashana, we've got to consider, how do we approach them? What is our perspective? Do we deal with them in the way of the Nebuch, his pitiful, often self-pitying way, or an approach with more, what can we do? What is in our hands, and let's make that special? You know, throughout history, there's been a progression of the way we look at our human rights and how we behave. We started off with the idea, and this is the Torah idea, that we all have responsibilities. We have responsibilities towards others. We have responsibilities to be kind to others, to help the needy, help the sick. We have responsibilities in business, to be honest in business. We have responsibilities to Hashem, to our families, etc. Then there came the idea of rights. We've got in America, the Bill of Rights, and the UN Declaration of Rights for everyone, number of rights. So now it's not about our responsibilities that we have to be good to others. It's about every individual has the right to goodness happening to them. But then we have a third stage, a third era. We've passed the era of responsibility, then the era of rights, and now we've perhaps moved onto the era of Nebuch. It's not even about rights anymore. It's about how I am aggrieved and why things have been destroyed for me, and now I'm stuck. We're going to approach it through the lens of a few pictures, a few windows into inspirational characters' lives and not so inspirational characters' lives. But I want to just first preface that whatever I say tonight are things that they've been inspiring to me, and I hope that they'll also allow all of us to take a step forward with confidence and with bitachon, with joy. This is not meant to make someone who's already feeling low feel any lower. It's not meant to criticize someone who's going through difficulty. On the contrary, they've got enough already. We're not here to preach. But for whoever can take inspiration from this, I think it can be really powerful. To start with a personal anecdote. So 13 years ago, I had just been ordained as a rabbi. I had received my smicha. I was working as a tutor in a yeshiva gedola smicha in Los Angeles. And I was about to go on my first shidduch date. And I flew from Los Angeles to New York to meet with someone. I get off the plane, wait for my luggage, and I see on the carousel, everything is coming through. Everyone's taking their luggage. The crowd is dispersing. Mine isn't there. After 20 minutes, I go over to one of the staff and I say, excuse me, my luggage hasn't come through. They check on their computer system and they say, yeah, it's actually coming in 2 days. Sorry, went on the wrong flight. It's coming in 2 days. And I'm thinking, well, I've got a date in a few hours. I can't wait 2 days. And here I had a choice. I could either sit there. It was probably before smartphones, or they weren't as prevalent. I could start, complaining on social media. Look what this airline did. They messed me up. Scream at all the stuff I could find. Just vent a little. And then where would I be 2 hours later, 3 hours later, 4 hours later? I'd still be there. Still in the airport. Still complaining. Nothing to wear for going out. I'm going out that night. Still in my stinky socks. So I decided on another course of action. I said, well, I guess this is just not happening. Today I spent about $400 of the $700 or $800 I had to my name at the time, and I bought a new suit and whatever else I needed, shoes, etc., and went on the date. And within 2 hours I knew that she was not the one. Well, she wasn't the one, but things moved on. I soon met my wife. A few months later, we got married. Now 13 years later, have 5 children together. Baruch Hashem, a lot of blessings. Thank God. I want to bring us on a little journey and look at some people who have been inspirational to me. People who have both in people, someone who I've met, as well as Torah characters who have very much influenced me and been inspiring to me, telling me, whatever the challenge is, let's move forward. But first, the main mitzvah of Rosh Hashana is the shofar. And the shofar contains within it an amazing message of empowerment. The shofar represents 3 important keys. It tells us, number 1, you come from a special, glorious past. You come from good stock. The shofar reminds us of Akedat Yitzchak, of the binding of Isaac, where Avram was willing to give up his son for Hashem. Yitzchak was willing to die for Hashem. It reminds us of the great event in our past, Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, where we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do, and then we'll understand. We accepted the Torah and became Hashem's special people. And that tells us that don't think I've got such a past I can't achieve. No, you have a wonderful past. That's message 1 of shofar. Message number 2 is the present. The shofar serves as a wake-up call. It's an alarm. It says, wake up, make that change. It says that we are not stuck in our present, but we can change the script for today and for tomorrow. And then finally, for the future. The shofar reminds us of the great shofar that will be sounded when Mashiach comes. The shofar gadol, tkab shofar gadol, and tells us you have good things coming your way. So we're not stuck in the past. Our past is actually great. We're not stuck in the present. It's a wake-up call. At any point we can say, I'm going to do something different. And the same with the future, where our future is something wonderful. We've just got to keep at it. Now, I'd like to share some anecdote. This is about my grandfather, Yossi Kaltman, Mr. Yossi Kaltman. He passed away about 4.5 years ago. And then move on to the Torah and Haftarah reading. Let's go back to Germany, 1945. My grandfather had survived 7 concentration camps. He had lost his father and mother, one set of grandparents, brother and sister, uncles and aunts and cousins. He was in an American hospital for survivors, DP. And he's there for a while, and then he's got this itch. I've got to go on, I've got to do something. It's one of his favorite lines, do something I've got to achieve. He borrowed Herschel Schechter's tefillin, he puts on the tefillin, and then he says, that's it. He jumps out some window, and off he goes, still in the clothes commissioned to him. And he gets onto a train going to his hometown, Bratislava. He lies down on the train. They don't let him come in. It was an army train, but they let him lie down on top, and he goes there lying on top of the train until it arrives back from Germany to Bratislava in Slovakia. And though he was scarred, though he had been through terrible situations, he had this strong sense, whatever's happened, let's move on with bitachon and with zrizut, with enthusiasm, whatever is needed, despite the terrible memories. I'll continue with this story later. Let's first move on to Hagar. In the Torah portions and Haftarahs of Rosh Hashana, we read about great women. If you want to start your year right, it's understood. It's got to start with inspiration from women. The Talmud says that it is the woman that brings blessing to the home and happiness and goodness, and therefore that's where we start our year. So in the first day's reading, we read about Sarah, Yitzchak, Hagar, Yishmael, and Avram and Sarah married. Sarah doesn't have children for many years. Eventually she tells Avram, why don't you marry also Hagar? Maybe you'll have children from her. Yishmael is born. Years later, Yitzchak is born. Yishmael is a bad influence on Yitzchak. Sarah decides they've got to move on. They've got to leave, and instructs Hagar, and Yishmael tells Avram to tell them, move on. And Hagar and her son Yishmael leave. Yishmael is sick, and as they're going through the desert, he's consuming a lot of water. Eventually there's no more water, and Hagar gives up. She says, there's no more hope, he's finished. So what happens now? Actually, there was water there. But because she has given up, because in her mind it's all over, she doesn't see it. And Hashem has to open her eyes and say, look, there's water. Give your son from that water. She does so, and Yishmael is revived and survives, becomes a great nation. Here we see with Hagar that she didn't have that bitachon, that ability to see the good and rise above, even when there are challenging situations. And this isn't the first time. When Hagar had run away previously, and an angel comes to her after she'd run away and says, what's going on? And she says, because of Sarah, my boss, I've got to run away. So again, she can't see her own agency. She can only see how, why am I stuck? Why did I have to run away? Because of someone else. Same, both situations. Seeing no hope, blaming, rather than positively marching forward. Let's look at the Haftarah. First day, Rosh Hashana, the Haftarah talks about Hannah. Hannah was a special, spiritually sensitive lady. She was married to Elkanah, who was one of the leaders of the Jewish people at the time. And in a loving marriage, in relative comfort, but there was a major gaping hole in her life. She didn't have children, and she intensely yearned for children. So once she goes to the Mishkan, the tabernacle was the forerunner before the Beit HaMikdash, before the temple, and she prays there, she davens there. She was blessed, her prayers were answered, and she's blessed with a son called Shmuel, became a prophet and a Jewish leader. While Hagar saw despair, Hannah saw hope. While Hagar blamed, Hannah said, let's do this. She went to the Mishkan, she prayed for it, and she not only asked, but she said, this is what I'm going to give for it. She told Hashem. And she said, I'll dedicate my son to your service. So Hannah, even when she was praying, it was not just for her. She was saying, yes, I'm asking you for something, but then with that, give me that request, give me that child, and I'll dedicate that child to you, Hashem. And that takes us back to the continuation of the story with my grandfather. He arrives back in his hometown, Bratislava. A lady, a non-Jewish lady, sees him. She feels bad. She feels a bit guilty, I suppose, for the lack of support from the neighbors. And she offers him a sum of money. Says, here, I want to give you something to get yourself back on your feet. He says, no thanks. Thank you, but no thanks. I don't want to accept it. And she says, please, I insist you take it. Finally, he says, okay, I'll take it. But as a gift, as a loan, not as a gift. And he says, I'm borrowing this, I'll pay you back. Indeed, he starts some business, buying and selling, and within a few months, he pays her back. He didn't want handouts. He wanted, you're giving me something, what can I do with it? Like Hannah, who said, give me a child and I will make something great for everyone from that. Eventually, my grandfather moved to Australia. He had 3 children. He had educated them in the ways of Torah, the ways of kindness. He built a successful business. Today he has over 40 descendants and was always a happy person. He had nightmares at night, but during the day, a happy person, a positive person, and a person of faith. His message was no to victimhood, no to self-pity, no to handouts, but yes to moving forward. Let's go back to Hannah. So Hannah names her son Shmuel, which means borrowed from Hashem. In other words, I'm borrowing something and I'm going to pay it back and more, which she indeed does with her son. She says, yes, I'm praying now for a son, but we're going to contribute with that. Let's prove those who say we are now the generation of Nebachs, the generation of victims wallowing in self-pity. Let's prove wrong those who say that we're the ones still complaining 17 years later about the fact that we had to clean up that soup. Let's remember famous lines. JFK said, ask not what you can do for your country, ask what your country can do for you. And he may not have known it. It's a great line. He may not have known it, but the line was previously said by the Alter Rebbe, the author of Tanya. The Alter Rebbe said to a chassid who came in to a private audience, a yechidut, where the Alter Rebbe was going to act as his spiritual coach. And he talks about all the difficulties in his life and how this is not going well and that's not going well in his family and his financial situation, spiritual situation. And the Alter Rebbe says to him, after listening and after empathizing, but the Alter Rebbe then says to him, you have been speaking only about what you need, but about what you are needed for, you have said nothing. The chassid was totally shaken. That line was perhaps reverberating through the air, picked up as well by JFK, but it's a line that we all have to take. We think a lot about what we need. Let's also consider what we are needed for. I saw a TED Talk recently which said that very different emotions produce the same basic sensations on the body. So fear and excitement, in terms of what the body looks like, what the body is doing, they look basically the same. They're almost identical. So let's transition from fear to excitement, from anger to passion. Let's change our mindset. Let's do rather than complain. Step forward rather than explain why we can't. Help others, positively impact others, rather than just looking within, self-centered. No mitzvahs beyond our reach. Someone might say, I didn't grow up with davening, I didn't grow up with prayer. It's not something that I can really do, both in terms of knowing the practicals of prayer, as well as the whole idea of talking to God. It's like, wow. Just jump in. Go for it. Do it. Someone who says, well, learning Torah, well, a video about Israel, fine. Something maybe even about Jewish cuisine or Jewish humor, fine. But studying real Torah, can't do that. So we should know that we've got to, if you just take that step forward, it's in your hands. If you hear that inner voice inside you telling you that everything's gone wrong, I'm feeling resentful about current life, whether it's corona related or for other reasons, let that powerful refrain reverberate in your ears and say, you are very much consumed with what is wrong, with your needs, but what are you needed for? No mitzvahs beyond our reach. It's up to us, and we can do it. Forward march. Chazak.